Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
What is going on in Ottawa?
The government of Canada itself is spiraling out of control right before our eyes and at the very worst time.
Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are focused on themselves. They're fighting themselves instead of fighting for Canadians. And for that reason, today I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
It's an honor for me tonight to become Canada's finance minister and to remain as the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs.
For most of the day Monday, Canada, a G7 nation with a $2 trillion economy, did not have a Minister of Finance. It was chaos in the halls of power on Parliament Hill. There were rumors Trudeau himself was considering stepping down or proroguing Parliament. At the end of the day, he settled for a hastily appointed new Minister of Finance, another front-bench Trudeau loyalist, Dominic LeBlanc. Mr. LeBlanc will now be tasked with delivering the 2025 federal budget in just a few short months. In the meantime, both major opposition parties, the Conservatives and the NDP, are calling for Trudeau's resignation. It's only Tuesday. Where does the week go from here? I'm David Smith. This is The Big Story. To help us make sense of what's happening with the Trudeau government, I'm joined by Garry Keller. Garry is Vice President at Strategy Corp here in Ottawa. He spent a previous career on Parliament Hill in various senior roles, including Chief Parliamentary Advisor to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Hello, Garry.
Great to be with you, David.
Thanks for taking the time. So here we are at the end of the day, Monday. As we are recording this, Justin Trudeau has not resigned. He has appointed a replacement for Chrystia Freeland as Minister of Finance, and he is currently, as we record this, speaking with the Liberal caucus. They're having a national caucus meeting in Ottawa to hash out everything that happened today. So what is your main takeaway from what went down with Chrystia Freeland?
Well, I think my analysis is how they handled the Freeland situation was an acute example of political malpractice run amok. I mean, in Chrystia Freeland's letter today, and it is a scathing letter, and if people haven't read it, I encourage them to read it because it really does talk about the Prime Minister's personal decisions to advance certain agendas at the expense of fiscal probity. I think really what is being said here is they had a chance to meet with her on Friday. He basically told her on Friday that he didn't have confidence in her abilities to lead, and they let that fester over the weekend. Instead of letting her present the fall economic update today and then doing a cabinet shuffle Wednesday or Thursday, how they've handled this internally is quite baffling to me. But that being said, you have a real division within the Liberal Party on how they believe that they should be approaching the fiscal challenges that we have. And Chrystia Freeland is very clear in that letter about the need for Canada to preserve from fiscal firepower in the wake of threats from Donald Trump in the United States on tariffs. And we now have a deficit this year of $62 billion. They blew the $40 billion fiscal anchor completely out of the water. And here we are.
Okay, so let's kind of take this piece by piece. What kicked all of this off was apparently a meeting between Trudeau and Freeland last Friday where Trudeau said he wanted to move her out of the role of Minister of Finance. The key context there is that there's been months of reporting now on tension between the Prime Minister's office and Chrystia Freeland's office over her performance as the Minister of Finance. What do you think that move by Trudeau suggests about how he's viewing his own political problems right now?
Well, and I think it just reinforces how certain people around him, himself, his chief of staff, and certain leadership in the Prime Minister's office think that the problem is the messaging or the problem is the communications. It's not the Prime Minister. It's how everyone else is doing their job. And that is a huge characterization of reality. The country is tired of Justin Trudeau. They're tired of his agenda. Lots of Liberals for lots of time have been saying that the Prime Minister is not resonating with Canadians anymore. And, I've had people talk to the Prime Minister's office and they say, well, guys, it doesn't look too great. And they say, don't worry about it. He's a great campaigner. He's great on the campaign trail. And man, he's going to have some excellent lines to go against Pierre Poilievre, suggesting they think it's all about communications. It's not. They are completely fooling themselves about how Canadians see Mr. Trudeau. The polls bear that out. Their internal polls have to be bearing this out. And so to me, it's extreme political malpractice where the inner circle has gotten so small that they're drinking each other's bathwater and not actually facing up to the reality that Mr. Trudeau faces.
Fast forward, all weekend long, Chrystia Freeland sits on this. And then Monday morning at 9 a.m., just a few hours before she's supposed to present the fall economic statement, she releases her resignation letter publicly on Twitter and throws a huge grenade into what should have been a positive news story day for the Liberals. What kind of message do you think she was sending by going about resigning that way?
Well, it's designed to throw the government and Mr. Trudeau into complete chaos and to cause the maximum amount of damage to him politically. The contents of the letter are one thing, which are, damning in themselves of the Prime Minister and his economic policies. But this was all designed to cause the maximum amount of damage on the government on the day when it was supposed to table its fall economic update. For a long time today, there was no indication of who would deliver it, how it would be delivered, whether it would be delivered or not, who would be the finance minister. And they really have to have a finance minister by the end of the day on Monday, because you can't open the financial markets on Tuesday morning with no finance minister. That would send a complete chaos into the markets, that there is no political leadership at the highest levels of the government of Canada. We'll have to watch what the dollar does over the next few hours and days to see if it stabilizes, but it has been up and down throughout the day today. And it's dropped about 4.5 cents since September. This is a real challenge going forward. And, I think she accomplished what she set out to do, I would say, looking back at the events of the day.
And yet, she's going to stay on as a Liberal MP. She says she's going to run again in the next election. She attended the caucus meeting on Monday evening. Why? What do you make of that?
I think that clearly signals that to say, the problem is not me, it's him. I've been saying it for a long time. And fellow caucus members, if you agree with me that the problem is him and not me, I am reoffering myself at the next election, and I could be a potential leader of the Liberal Party. That's what it signals to me.
So you think her eye is on the next leadership race for the Liberal Party?
I had thought that she would not run for a long time, and this is a bit of a mug's game determining that, but her actions and how she conducted herself and her statement about running in the next election, to me, demonstrates that she is setting herself to be up as an alternative for disaffected Liberals in the next election.
Okay, so Monday night, Justin Trudeau does not speak at all to the media publicly, doesn't say anything all day Monday. Hastily appoints a new finance minister in Dominic LeBlanc. Now, Dominic LeBlanc is a strong lieutenant for Trudeau, frontbencher, loyalist, was with Trudeau when Trudeau met with Donald Trump a couple weeks ago in Mar-a-Lago. What do you think of Dominic LeBlanc for finance minister?
Well, at a time like this, when you have chaos, and this is, from my observations, being in politics for 20 years, when you have chaos at the highest levels of government, you need stability and you need people you can trust. And Dominic LeBlanc is clearly somebody who the Prime Minister believes he can trust. They have a long history together. Dominic LeBlanc famously tells the story of how he used to babysit Justin Trudeau when his dad was at Rideau Hall and across the street to do that. And so they have a long relationship. And Dominic LeBlanc is trusted as somebody with good political judgments by not just the prime minister, but the wider Liberal team. He is a bit of a bon vivant, so him going to Mar-a-Lago was not a surprise to me because he's the kind of guy that could have a bit of a jocular and friendly relationship with those around President Trump and President Trump himself. And so when you're in a spot of trouble, you want the people you can count on. And clearly, the prime minister believes he can count on Dominic LeBlanc.
What is all of this suggesting about the longevity, the lifespan, the expiration date of this Trudeau government? Just the feeling, Garry, a vibe check, if you will. You were around in the dying days of the Harper government in 2015. There was a feeling, right? What's the feeling right now for the Trudeau government?
A vibe check during the vibe session. Look, the feeling and the internal situation is bad. This is worse than I have probably ever experienced when I was in government. People resign, people do certain things, but I mean, this is the way it was conducted was a missile directed right at the prime minister and his team and his office. He will have to see what happens tonight. If he can survive the next few hours, the House of Commons only sits for one more day. Funnily enough, the Liberal Christmas party is tomorrow night, so I'm not sure I would want to be in the room at that. And my invitation certainly did not come. But the mood's going to be very, very bad. And I think the prime minister thinks that he's just got to get through tomorrow, and then he can shuffle his cabinet, and then he can go dark for the Christmas holidays. It may be too early to say that. Like I said, the next minutes and hours could be very, very instructive for the prime minister and his team, whether he survives.
So the Conservatives have been calling for Justin Trudeau to step down for years now. Today, Monday, the leader of the New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh, called for Justin Trudeau to resign, but at the same time would not commit to voting non-confidence at the next opportunity and actually defeating this government. What do you make of that position?
I mean, it's laughable. I mean, Justin Trudeau is the head of that government. And so to say you have no confidence and you want the prime minister to resign but keep his government in power, to me, it is just the height of political responsibility and a political hypocrisy that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP know they don't have the money or the resources to go to an election. And they are trying to play this for maximum advantage that Liberal and left of center voters see them as the next alternative and that Liberal votes move to the New Democrats at the next election. The problem for them is if you continue to back up this government, this Liberal government, when you have said months ago saying they're horrible, terrible, no good government that needs to be taken down, at what point do people not believe you anymore? And they just tune you out. And I think there's a real risk in that for Mr. Singh. I don't understand this continual desire to prop up the government. And I think I think in the long term, it'll be a mistake, but we'll see. I might be wrong.
So one of the ways the Liberals may try to defend how they've handled this situation with Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, resigning and pointedly attacking the prime minister as the reason for her resignation. One of the ways they may try to explain why this isn't grounds to call an election, I think may have to do with the upcoming negotiations with incoming President Donald Trump when it comes to trade. We have the threat of 25% tariffs on all Canadian imports to the United States. An argument could be made that now is the time for stability. We want to have the same government for continuity while these negotiations unfold over the course of the next 8 months to a year, what have you. The fixed election date isn't until October of 2025. What kind of disadvantage does this series of events put the Trudeau government at when it comes to dealing with Mr. Trump?
Well, certainly they're going to make that argument that we need stability and a government in place. We can't afford an election at this time. But what stability are they providing? Today was the most unstable day I've seen in Canadian politics in probably 20 years. So if they're trying to spin that they are providing stability by today's actions, the actions over the next few days, I don't really believe that. And I don't think a lot of Canadians are going to believe that. Furthermore, recent polling demonstrates that when asked head to head, who do you think is better to try to protect Canada's interests, Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Poilievre? Mr. Poilievre is winning that head to head battle 3-1. So Canadians aren't buying that at all. And I think that there's a massive risk that the incoming Trump administration, especially the people around Donald Trump, who will follow this closer than he would, will say they are at a government of Canada. Canada is at a point of maximum weakness. The premiers are saying one thing. The federal government is saying another. There's division in the ranks. Now is our opportunity to really hammer home what we want out of Canada. And so it's going to be a huge risk for the federal government as it tries to figure out what our strategy is, because you have the premiers going off and doing one set of things when the government doesn't seem to be reacting very strongly publicly to these sorts of things. And Doug Ford looked very leader-like today in his approach for calling for not just calm, but for a united front going forward with the upcoming discussions of the United States.
There was a period of time Monday afternoon when it looked like Prime Minister Trudeau might resign. He was reportedly considering his options, and that was one of them. In the end, again, he has refused to step down. He's missing now in Chrystia Freeland, one of the strongest players in his cabinet, and yet they are going to continue to hang on to government. It would appear, regardless of the cost to the political brand or to Trudeau's brand personally. So we're recording this, Garry, Monday evening. Listeners are listening to it on Tuesday. So is there anything in your mind that could happen in this week that may prompt the Prime Minister to reconsider? Is there anything that could happen that might force his hand and force him to resign?
I think the outcome of Monday evening's caucus meeting and discussions with cabinet ministers, if you've got cabinet ministers in great numbers either resigning or saying to the Prime Minister and his team, you don't have my support anymore, and I'm speaking on behalf of half or more of the caucus, I think if you're a Prime Minister, you have to take that seriously. You have to look at that and say, okay, it really is me. I'm the only one who can affect this change. And so maybe I go, just before Christmas and we launch a Liberal leadership race. But like I say, I think the next minutes and hours on Monday evening leading into Tuesday will be very indicative of where things happen. Because if the uniform view of the caucus and the cabinet is this dog won't hunt, then I don't know how he continues on in the long term.
Because on Tuesday will be the last day of the sitting of Parliament for this session. They won't be back until January, well after the holidays. At this point, there's no way for the House of Commons to vote to bring down the government. Is that correct?
Correct. All those opposition days and opportunities for Mr. Poilievre to bring non-confidence motions forward have been disposed of. They've been beaten back or defeated by the Liberals and New Democrats together. They will not be bringing the fall economic statement up for a vote in the House of Commons because that is too great a risk. Now, the Senate sits for a few more days, and that is of note because last week the House of Commons passed a bunch of spending bills, which a lot of people breathed a sigh of relief. However, those bills have not yet passed the Senate. So until those bills pass the Senate, which the Senate sits until later this week, those bills will not pass. And so I would think if the prorogation is on the table for the government, they'll want to wait until after those pass so that government funding goes through. So it's still a few moving parts here from the procedural side, but in terms of actual confidence votes in the House of Commons, those have all been disposed of for the fall.
Mark Carney. Let's talk about Mark Carney. So Mr. Trudeau, apparently, according to Chrystia Freeland and according to reporting now by the Globe and Mail, Mr. Trudeau essentially told Chrystia Freeland, you're not the finance minister anymore. He offered her this other position in cabinet, but the tone of that suggested that he had somebody else in mind to come in and fill the role of finance, not Dominic LeBlanc, not the person who's doing it now. That person, many people will tell you, is Mark Carney. And yet Mark Carney, as we sit here today, is not the finance minister. Did he tell the prime minister no? If you're Mark Carney, why would you want to get involved with this government?
Well, not only that, apparently Mr. Carney is not even in the country right now. So perhaps he was getting while the getting was good. Look, it's a very open question. I'm not sure why he would want sort of this poison chalice right now, other than if he sees it a way to establish himself as a Minister of Finance, bring stability and calmness to Canada, to the markets, et cetera, by having him in place, and then using that as a basis to organize a potential run as a future leader of the Liberal Party. And if Mr. Trudeau sees the only worthwhile successor to him is Mr. Carney, well, then maybe there is some thinking there. But boy, there's a lot of things that have to go right for the Carney and the Liberals for that to be true. And, Mr. Poilievre has spent the last number of months trying to brand Mr. Carney well before he would even seek elected office as carbon tax Carney. It's one of his favorite lines, and expect to see more of that. So this is no panacea for the Liberals, in my opinion.
Let's just look at the crystal ball here just for fun. Let's say Trudeau does resign. Let's say an interim leader of the Liberal Party is appointed. They do a leadership race. Could a interim leader at the helm of the Liberal Party lead this government all the way until October, until that fixed election date? Given what you've mentioned already about the NDP, they have very little money. They're in a bad position to run a national election right now. What are the odds that this changes the timing for the next election?
Well, it's a good question, because now you have to start looking at 2025's potential election triggers. We're going to have 7 opposition days between January 27th and March 31st, and another 8 opposition days from April the 1st to middle of June, plus a budget, which will be a confidence motion, plus a few other things which will likely be a confidence motion, including any legislation coming from today's fall economic statement. So that, I've just listed there probably about 18 to 20 possible votes of confidence in the House of Commons. Can they survive all of them? And how can the NDP even survive? Like, take all of those out of the equation, just say the budget itself. How can the NDP say that they are standing up for Canadians and supporting that budget when it looks like they're just doing it for their own naked self-interest? I find it hard, even though there's been a lot of talk in Ottawa lately that, oh yes, we're going to go to October of last year. I just have never been able to see the math on how that works. And so, that, like I say, would require the NDP to turn down a number of opposition non-confidence motions or votes of confidence. Math gets pretty hard for them going forward. But we'll see. They've done it so far to date, and they don't think it is effective.
So it's still an open-ended question. By no means does this guarantee the Liberals will be able to survive until October of next year.
Absolutely not. No, that's a very open question, and it could change by the day, right? It was certainly this week, between last week and this week, nobody had this on their bingo card for Monday, December the 16th.
Garry Keller, thank you so much for your time as we continue to watch the fallout in political Ottawa. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you, David.
And again, that is Garry Keller, Vice President at Strategy Corp, former advisor to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. That is the view from inside the Ottawa bubble as Justin Trudeau has survived another chaotic day at the helm of the Liberal Party and as Canada's Prime Minister. That's all for the Big Story podcast today. Thank you so much for listening. A reminder about the Seeker app. Great new listening experience. Radio, podcasts, all in one place. Seeker, Seekr. That's available on the App Store and Google Play for iPhone or Android. Really recommend you check that out. I'm David Smith. Until next time, thank you for listening.